Well, everyone, we hear so many exciting and lurid stories about Senator Lidia Thorpe over these past few months, but in far too rarely do they involve Lydia's actual input, it seems. But not today, and that's one of the many reasons why I'm so pumped to have you on as a guest. Lidia Thorpe, hello and welcome, mate.
Hello, Tom. Brother Tom, thank you very much for agreeing to have a conversation about truth. And yes, you only ever hear one side. So thanks for the opportunity.
Oh,
And
no.
I will say that we're all on stolen land, and it's been a long, hard fight for our old people over the last 200 years. And I just want to acknowledge those warriors of the frontier wars and generations of survivors.
Thank you, and thanks so much for coming on. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And Lydia, yeah, as I say, so often I see discussions happening, particularly over the course of 2023, in the media and political space about you. For months now, but rarely do they seek your input. They might reference a statement that you have released, if that. And I feel as a layperson onlooker that lately it seems like most of the Australian political media establishment is hell-bent on telling stories about how rude and badly behaved you are. Is that sort of how you've experienced these past several months?
Absolutely. I've had to endure all kinds of lies and misinformation and hear about it the next day and wonder what I'm waking up to each day and what the next attack will be. And it's not something that is new to me, having call out so much injustice in all my life and seeing my grandmothers and mother go through this also in terms of just fighting for basic justice. There are always people that are threatened by that, and at the end of the day it's easier to demonize somebody like me and look for any mistake or inflate something that really is nothing.
Yeah.
And that's what I've had to endure.
Yeah, because as you've just pointed out, the Thorpe family is a multi-generational activist fighting family, and I guess later on I'd like to maybe mention or address that kind of that separation or that communication breakdown between activist or black sovereignty politics and kind of parliamentary politics, which sometimes I feel was part of the communication breakdown here. But most of all today, I want to give you the mic, Lydia, and eventually address where all this resistance to you stems from in terms of your political positions. But first, I guess it'd be great to clear the air on some of these recent months of really distorted coverage, and occasionally outright lies told in the press about you. So, God, mate, where did we begin? Why don't we start most recently and work our way backwards? Does that sound like a plan? You went out, I think, for a mate's birthday party on the weekend. Is that right?
I did, and I haven't been out in a while. I don't get to go
Yeah,
out. It's always an issue for me to go out because of my safety in public.
yeah,
And I have been advised a number of times by the Australian Federal Police that I need to watch where I go and that I am, potentially a target. But on this occasion, I decided that I would accept an invitation after declining so many.
yeah.
I needed to be there for one of my longest sister girls that we did grease lightning together when we were 5 years of age. And
Amazing.
it was incredible, and there were, it was a it was play and dance that we're involved in as Aboriginal kids in the community. So
Yeah,
they were all black kids doing grease lightning, and my white grandmother, Nan Carmel, made our outfits, which were little gold kind of singlety things with blue tassels.
Amazing.
And little matching gold skirts with our bellies hanging out.
Oh, amazing.
And we were only 5. And so I've known my sister girl since then. And it was time that I went and celebrated. We went to her house. The party was at her house. We had an incredible time there. And then it was quite early. And the girls wanted to go and dance. So we said, let's go and dance. And there was a place in Brunswick, which we'd been to before, which is called Bar Uso.
Yeah.
Bar Uso. So we headed there because it said on the on Siri that it was still open. And we arrived and the doors were closing, and there were people on the street that said, look, you know, you'll be able to have a good time in there, have a drink, and it's great. So
yeah.
I didn't realise. I looked up and thought, oh, my gosh, it's old Crystal Teas. Went there about 30 years ago with my grandmother.
Yeah.
And been to, you know, a few nights there, probably 20, 30 years ago now. So I walked in. It was a fun night. Girls played pool, and we had a couple of drinks. And we went to leave, or actually we had walked out of the door when a tall, very fair-skinned man, middle-aged white man, I would say, probably a bit younger, just started verbally attacking me, saying he knew who I was, and spoke quite derogatory at me, and that triggered a response.
Early this morning outside a strip club in Melbourne.
You know what I say? You know what I say to you? Shut up. You know what I say to you? And you?
You're a racist
penis.
Tom.
Oh, penis. God.
Independent Senator Lidia Thorpe and her friends out to celebrate her 50th birthday.
How dare you say that?
And I automatically don't allow people to speak to me that way or treat me that way when I'm with 3 other black women who were also insulted. And, you know, we had to kind of all contain the situation, get in the taxi. The taxi was there the whole time. If we had have just been allowed to walk out of the club and get into the taxi that was waiting, which we had organised, then there would have been no problem. But this person could not help himself. But to have a shot at me when we were happy, I mean, it was just left field. And, you know, I've heard also from my girlfriends that there were people outside that weren't even in the club. So it seemed that more people had arrived with cameras.
Randoms ready to go.
I walked into a trap.
Yep. But hang on, Lidia, because we've already got a jarring discrepancy here between what's actually happened that night and what we were told happened by Maxine's club manager and later owner, I think, Maxine Fenson, because they released a statement sort of opportunistically barring you for life from their establishment, which I'm sure you're devastated about. And in that, and in that they suggested that you were wandering around the club telling men that they were on stolen land. Is that something you do?
I love that. I love that they come up with things that I probably would say in any other space, but not in a space where I'm hanging out, having fun with my girlfriends.
Yeah.
It's not like we go out and talk politics and talk about stolen land all night. We're actually there celebrating 50 years of, you know, a beautiful sister. So I think that's, you know, it's laughable. It's absolutely laughable. And I think that it's been a real opportunity for Maxine's strip club. It's, you know, there were probably, I could count how many people on one hand. So they must be struggling for for patrons to take an opportunity and get into the media, and you know, that's a fact of the matter. And since then, which I found out a couple of days later, that I've been banned from a club that is struggling. I've had a number of invitations to other strip clubs saying that I'm welcome there anytime, which is like, wait on, it was one-off, and I certainly won't be celebrating my 50th at a strip club.
Suddenly the world of Melbourne strip clubs has opened up to you. Amazing. But it's kind of like, it's a really ridiculous, like, Marbo panic fantasy, isn't it? You know, this fairy tale about a black woman running around a strip club telling white men that they're on stolen land. Like, it's like you're being painted as a cartoon villain at this point, without any input required from you, hey, you know?
Oh, look, it's, you know, sit back and have the popcorn ready, because it feels that it's relentless.
Yeah.
And no matter what I do, what I say, where I go, who I speak to, who I associate with, it becomes a headline. And I think that only shows that this country is, you know, frightened of the truth, and they're being, you know, they've had to deal with it head on because they can't get rid of me. You know, they want me to resign, and this is what they do to people to shut them down, particularly black women. And I'm not going to be shut down. I'm there for 5 years, and I came into that place because I want to get justice, real justice for blackfellas in this country. And they can do all the dirty deals that they like in the parliament. And we know who these right-winged politicians are aligned with, and it seems to be a nice little, you know, paper trail all the way along. So they need to know that I'm not going away. And this is a clear message to everybody out there that I do want peace, regardless of what you think of me. I do want to bring this nation together. And sometimes that involves some really hard truths about what has happened, but also what continues to happen in this country to First Nations people.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you're definitely... probably much more so owing to your positions, your political positions, not just on black sovereignty, but topically on the voice of Parliament and the like. You know, you've become like a danger in a bipartisan sense, I feel. And otherwise, why would Prime Minister Anthony Albanese come out and say that he thinks you should get, I don't know, support, mental health support, or for giving a tongue lashing to some racists who had a go at you? You know, I mean, I noticed with Albanese that he also said the other day when there were neo-Nazis sig-hailing outside Parliament, in his statement he said people should be able to disagree without having really hostile, nasty relations. And I think like the two of those statements come to mind for me because it always seems to go back to the politics of optics or civility, hey? You know, like you're being told... the core message, because you didn't actually attack anyone in the club. You had a great night. You went outside. Someone had a go at you and filmed your response. So when you boil down to it, the only thing you're being told here is for the nth time you're being told to behave again, aren't you?
Absolutely. And look, when I said that person had a little dick, it was for the reason that you waited for us to walk out of the door, and then you had all your mates around you, and then you had a go at me. I mean, what kind of person, don't call yourself a man or a big shot standing outside the door if you can basically wait and plan to have a go at a senator, a black senator, who was spending money in the club, but also having some really beautiful conversations and yarns with the bar women and other people in the place. I'm sure that they're not allowed to speak. But what has been portrayed is blatantly wrong, and it's also exemplary of how this country deals with people like me, whether I'm a senator or not. I'm a black woman, and look how black women are treated in this country.
Yeah, because if you were provocative or spoke your mind and you were a white nationalist, you'd probably end up on Dancing with the Stars instead of getting excoriated all the time for your behaviour, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean, you know, look at some of these politicians and what they get away with is just mind-blowing compared to, you know, a girl who grew up in Fitzroy, Collingwood and the burbs. You know, I learnt to survive on the streets, and I learnt to stand up against racism, not only for myself, but anybody else, and any form of discrimination. And that's what I continue to do. And it might come out a bit rough sometimes, but I can't shut my mouth to that. And I don't think anybody else in this country should be either. The more we stamp it out, the less it happens.
I think a lot of us are more happy about your approach, your robust working class approach to these things than they are worried about your professionalism. I think a lot more, and it's good to be able to say that to you actually, Lidia. But you know, again, as you say, you deal with bigots and the like at the time, and I guess that makes me want to go back to the last scandal, which is action that you took, and it involved recently when UK transphobe Posey Parker was touring. So you made an effort to approach her stand in Canberra for essentially a counter-protest action, because you're an activist, right? As well, you're a politician, you're also a veteran activist. And that's legendary stuff. So on behalf of many people, thank you. But all I could see from the footage was that you approached the counter in some way, but before you could, you were dragged off by police. Is that about how it went?
Look, I can't go into detail because it is subject to investigations.
Yeah.
And it is, there's only so much I can say, but what I can say is that trans mob are my mob. We're fighting the same battles, you know. It's discrimination. Yeah. It's people telling you how to live your life, and so that, you know, we're all connected, and to see and hear the disgusting comments and just what this person represents is all against our values in this country. And I have been blessed by the Ngunnawal Ngambri traditional owners on that country. I'm connected to the Tent Embassy, and I came down as an invitation to participate in that protest. And I mentioned to my staff member on the way to the protest, look, I'll just go and let this woman or this person know that she's not welcome here. Yeah. And that's all I did. That's all I did. And the rest is up for investigation and, I suppose, watch this space. Yeah, yeah. Astounding, though, that you were somehow, and I did see a lot of this in media, that you were somehow portrayed as the aggressor, you know, in an action in which you know, I mean, before you even got to do anything, you were, you know, set upon. They didn't know I was a senator. And, you know, I was just a black activist, staunch black woman protesting something that's not welcome on Ngambri and Ngunnawal country. And I sought advice from the traditional owners about what happened and what I'd said, and I had the full support that they too say that people like that are not welcome on their country. And as sovereign people, we should have a right to tell people like that that they are not welcome. Everyone talks about welcome to countries. Well, some people are not welcome. And that Posey Parker posing around ain't welcome.
I love it. I love it. And you know what? I think so many people, like trans people, trans comrades of mine, people who stand in support of them, they're all really grateful to you as well. We know what happened. But, you know, again, moving backwards to the year, this is not your only protest action that you've taken this year. And I guess that leads me to back in World Pride, or more specifically the Mardi Gras Parade, because there were about 20 seconds of scant footage that Twitter, the public, all sort of poured over obsessively, which was just, the footage showed you laying down in front of a truck at the Pride Parade. We were made to understand that the action you were taking was against the police presence at Pride, and we all, in my world, in the world of activists, we all know that you're not the only one who has objection to the police presence at events like Pride. So that's well known. But many people were confused then and were debating over what was going on or where it was in order you lay. But my understanding is that the full story is a lot more involved than that. Lidia, can you go through what actually happened on that day?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was part of the protest float. No Pride in Genocide, no police at Pride. And I was invited by that float to participate with them. We gathered to be part of that float, and we were having, we were part of the parade for quite some time. It is a long walk, and I am turning 50 this year, so I do have a couple of old netball injuries that don't allow me at the moment to walk too far without a rest. So I have some ankle issues. So I said, look, I need a rest, I need a feed, I need some water. It was quite a warm night. And I went off with another black sister who's quite known in the community, who I won't name at this point because of also legal reasons. But we went off and had a feed and had a rest at a black house that was there, who had an apartment where the parade was. So we went up there, had our rests. Then I got a call from one of the people on the protest float saying, look, we've moved on a bit, hurry up and catch up. So with that, we've joined back into the parade, and there's only certain areas you can join in, and there's only certain areas where you could actually leave because there's quite high gates. Anyhow, when we walked back into the parade, not planned at all, but we walked into the end of the police float, unbeknownst to us, except for we could hear everybody chanting, F the police, F the police. And so we just went into the Pride rally and the Pride March, or whatever they're calling it now, because it's a bit toned down, I think. Fuck the police, fuck the police. And a white, straight police officer stopped myself first, and took me to the ground. And then my sister came over to help, and so they continued to pursue us after we got up and away. They continued to pursue us, and there was no way out of the gates in that Pride March. The only thing I thought to do was to hold on to something to try and get some attention to stop these police. So I laid in front of a truck. I had no idea which truck it was. It was, I felt unsafe. And so I hung on to the truck asking for a female officer. And I laid there and said, please, can you get me a female officer? And I told that officer who kept coming at me, do not touch me, do not touch me.
Yeah.
And asked for a female. They brought some more people over, and that's when I felt safe enough to stand up. We still couldn't get out. We had to walk the whole way. We weren't asked to move on by police, like the media said. We weren't told anything by the organisers to move on or that we weren't welcome.
Yeah.
So we continue to walk to get out of the place. When we got to the end of the rally, there were approximately a dozen, if not more, police officers waiting at the end, and they were ready to arrest me, or they were coming at me. So I went to the side of the fencing and I held on with dear life, saying, please, please don't take me, and please don't touch me. Do not touch me. And they proceeded to come and get me, and they were, trying to get my arm off the pole. At that time, there were hundreds of people on their phones filming what had happened with those police and how they were trying to get me to go with them. And then when I'd had enough and when I felt like I was really in danger, I then said, I am a senator. My name is Lidia Thorpe and I am a senator for Victoria. And they backed off.
I see that sometimes people seem to skew the fact that you're in a position as a senator where, again, it might effectively tell a police officer they might back off. People seem to say that's it seemed to misrepresent that, whereas that's you using your power and privilege in an activist sense, isn't it? That's the way I see it. Do you see it that way?
I had to. I mean, there's been so many experiences for me as a senator where people didn't know I was a senator and I still faced discrimination. Canberra Airport was one of those examples, and the Canberra Airport were fantastic in getting back to me, and so was Qantas, but Virgin never got back. They never responded because I didn't say I was a senator. And I even had Mark Dreyfus say to me, why didn't you just tell them that you were a senator, Lidia? And I said, because we shouldn't have to. This happens all the time to our people. Why should I say I'm a senator? Why are they treating our people like this? He wasn't in power then, mind you.
Yeah.
But now that he is, and didn't have my back that day when I went to report it to the AFP, is a clear indication that, even people like that don't believe that racism occurs as much as it does.
Yeah. But you have used your position as well to be able to protect other people, because you have a lot of experience under the belt as an activist, and that's why you show up. And I've seen that. You're very consistent. Your family is. And, you were there, for example, in Victoria when young refugee rights activists were being pepper sprayed wantonly by Vic Pol, and you did what you could to stop it. I remember that.
That was terrible. I still think about those young people that were assaulted by the police that day, and that was the first protest I've ever been to in my whole life where I saw police being violent right in front of my eyes and spraying these young people directly into their eyeballs. And I was just horrified. I mean, you have to remember, I'm a mum and a grandmother. I have that maternal instinct of looking after people as well, particularly young people in those situations. I think I might have been the oldest one there. But I just said to the police, how dare you? I was just in shock. And then to be pushed by the police out of the way, that was the first time ever in my life I've been assaulted by the police. Ever. I've never been in trouble with the police. I've never been assaulted by the police. I've been in a police car because I've had to escape domestic violence as the victim, but I've never been in trouble. And the only times I've ever been assaulted by the police is as a senator. Go figure.
And it's been as a senator taking part in political action, which is increasingly repressed in this country, isn't it? Taking activist action is, and you've been there to witness that, and you've been on the receiving end of it, I suppose, hey?
Well, it's every day in Parliament also. And if you see, the headlines that from when I was in Parliament last, it's every it's every day where there's little niggly comments, racist little remarks, and you've got to just suck it up and either swallow it or do you call it out? And that's my conversation with the president of the chamber right now is, what do I do? Do I say nothing or do I call it out? Can you please give me some advice on that? Because that's my dilemma. Do I just let it go, let the racism go and pretend everything is okay in my workplace and get on with business?
Yeah. And yet that's not really in your nature, is it? You are someone, as we've discussed, who'll call out transphobia or police violence or racism. And because you do that and have a background as an activist and you are in the Senate, my sense is that, conservative and even traditionally mainstream progressive media, it seems, are having like a field day constructing you as, like I said earlier, like as a cartoon villain, painting you into these idiotic Marbo panic fantasies with no input required from you, Why do you think the Australian political and media establishment are so concerned with policing your rudeness?
Oh, look, I think different elements of the political spectrum have different reasons. I think if you look at the right-winged media, well, they're scared and they're becoming the minority, and they've not had to deal with truth in the way that's being put in their face every day. Yeah. Particularly in the chamber, they get really annoyed with it when they're called out for their disgusting behaviours that have been allowed in that place for so long. I think in terms of the progressives, they've all got their hands on their heart and they're feeling really good about the voice. It appeases their white guilt, makes them feel like they've done something for us, even though they won't pay the rent or, force the government to stop deaths in custody or stop child removal or give us our rights under the United Nations Declaration. If you've got your hand on your heart so much, why don't you put some pressure on the 32-year-old recommendations which will save our people's lives today, rather than the warm and fuzzy where you feel good by ticking a box and go home and not have to deal with the realities of what it's like to be black in this country. And then you've got, I suppose, the left. They're pretty much becoming one in the same, which is sad. And the radicals, well, we've either got mental health problems or we're just the troublemakers in society. And I must say on that, I met I know a couple of troublemakers, and I met a self-proclaimed troublemaker who's an incredible staunch Darug elder in the Blue Mountains, and she said she was a troublemaker, just like me.
Yeah.
And she said,
Pest.
I love you, and I just love it, Lydia. You just keep questioning it.
Yeah.
And then you have people like Ned Hargraves from Yindamu, who's reaching out saying he's got my back 100%, and meeting with elders at Yindamu talking about what the Central Land Council are doing to their people and their community. That's what's important in this country, and that's what people don't want to face.
Yeah.
And that's why they need to shut me down, just like they tried to do at the so-called Uluru meeting. It's all part of shutting black women's voices down, which is what the colonisers have been trying to do for over 200 years. And we're just getting louder and stronger.
And, you know, you in your I suppose in your politics, you're anything but symbolic, I think, because like when I pay attention to the things you say, I am never left in any doubt as to exactly what your politics are or what your stances are. Like, I always get an extremely firm sense of your perspective, you know, and how your actions, as we've been discussing before, even protest actions, marry up with your words, you know, more than most politicians, let's face it. Like, you are ostensibly bullshit free in that you mean what you say and you will take actions to show that you mean it. And
that's always got me into trouble.
Yeah.
Because I'm a straight shooter, straight talker. I've got nothing to hide. And people struggle with that. And they want me to conform to what? What do you want me to be like? You know, do you want me to be like Pauline Hanson? Do you want me to be like Jacinta Price? Do you want me to, you know, what's a good model politician that you all want me to be like? Because obviously being myself is hard for people to understand. And I'm a good person, Tom. I have a beautiful relationship. I have beautiful children. And my dad's been texting me all morning telling me he loves me, even though he threw me under the bus on Andrew Bolt last night. So, you know, we all have our own lives and our own complications. But I'm a loving person, and I'm genuinely wanting to bring this country together. Working class conservatives and the left on a journey towards peace and healing. Yeah.
I feel all this is a combo of silencing, as you said, silencing you for being a bold Indigenous woman, but also for having, you know, an activist perspective as well in Parliament. Like, parliamentary politics in Australia is deeply hostile to grassroots politics in a way. You know, and you said before, you talked about how you experience a lot of this prejudice or hostility in the Senate as well, like on the floor. Do you get a sense of say, mainstream or parliamentary politics as estrangement from, you know, grassroots politics?
Absolutely. I think a lot of these politicians just haven't been... They've been politicians too long. And they're just used to that world, you know, and they only think in that world. And I've changed things, like really basic things. I remember I was on a committee and a lot of single mums and dads wrote in about, I think it was the sole parent pension or childcare, and the automated response that the Parliament wanted to send to everyone who shared their story was, thank you for submitting to this committee. See you later.
Yeah.
And I read the stories, because you're meant to read your papers. So I read some of these stories and I was like, that was me back then. You know, thank you very much. See you later. No, I said, these these people have put their heart and soul into these letters that they've written to this committee. And I think that we should have more empathy and a respectful response to people rather than this automated government response. And so the whole template of the letters were changed that had some heart. I mean, that's just small, but
just one thing
makes a difference, let alone all the other stuff that I've been able to do in Parliament, you know, like the concussion into sport inquiry, which has been an incredible success. And I went and met with then the opposition, the coalition, did all of the negotiations to get that concussion in sport inquiry up. I had the whole Parliament support that. And now that's going to change the game for all of these codes that put our young people and our professional athletes and communities in danger when, well, it'll keep them safer when it comes to community sports and elite sports. And there'll be a whole lot of great recommendations from experts right across the country and abroad that have had input to this. We've got the AFL coming up to front to the inquiry.
Oh, wow.
And they've already made changes. So, you know, there's been so many wins that no one wants to report on. They don't want to report on the fact that I got, you know, amendments into the government's safeguard mechanism bill in terms of ensuring that there is genuine consent with traditional owners instead of being hijacked by their so-called land councils, which not always do the right thing.
Yeah.
This new clause in the legislation says that you have to also have genuine consultation with traditional owners on the ground, not just their peak body. Now, that's huge.
That's an incredible change. Yeah, that's huge.
Huge. I have got incredible relationships with a number of Labor ministers where I can just call them up and say, look, I have a problem with this amendment, or I have a problem with this part of the bill, where it hasn't even needed to be an amendment. They've just changed it because I've provided some good advice.
Yeah.
I've had input into the new $5 that nobody, like, there's so much that I've done in the background that people have no idea about because the media don't want to report the good stuff that I'm doing. My private senator's bill into the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. That has been delayed and delayed by now the Labor government because what are they afraid of? Who knows? But that's been a fight to ensure that we have a report and that we start enacting that declaration into the laws in this country. And it's not about saying do all the declaration at once, but let's look at some of those elements of the declaration that we can use in the systems here, which will make a big difference in people's lives.
Lidia, I feel it's your position on, or your response to, you know, the referendum on the voice to Parliament that has been, to me, most spectacularly obscured and muddled by the mainstream. You know, often quite intentionally, I think. But you've had your, you know, you've been in the discussion, but I have also felt that there's large chunks of the media that just don't want to give voice to what you say on that matter, whether it be because they want to construct a binary yes/no vote discussion that doesn't allow for an Indigenous rights-led or progressive or black sovereignty-led response that's against the whole referendum or the voice to Parliament. But you're definitely having your take muddled. Why does the Australian establishment seem to not be able to make any room for your position?
Because this country has an identity crisis. It doesn't know who it is. It doesn't know who itself is. And they refuse to acknowledge that we are sovereign peoples and that we are the oldest continuing living culture on the planet. We have the oldest constitution on the planet right here. And our constitution is made up of Jukupa, the laws of the land, the waters, the animals, the sky, the air, everything that we all need to survive as a people. And the progressive, well, we have to call it a progressive no, if you like, that doesn't get a say in anything, even though we wrote to the Prime Minister, I wrote to the Prime Minister on behalf of the Black Sovereign Movement to have a conversation with the referendum groups and the Minister for Indigenous Affairs and the Attorney General, whoever, like, just give us a meeting like you gave to Dutton. Why will you not allow that conversation to occur? I also have said to the Prime Minister personally when I sat in his office that it would be a respectful conversation on ways that we could move forward together. You would think that would be enough of you'd think that'd be enough to allow this conversation to occur. I do not know who's blocking this meeting from happening, but you can't always go with the yes people. You've got to understand why the progressive no has particular concerns. And I think that we could really come up with a way forward, but I don't know whether the government wants to hear that or whether the referendum council wants to hear that.
Yeah.
I don't know what is stopping them. And they need to ask themselves that. I think we've given the opportunity, we've given them the space. We've written to the Prime Minister and the Minister with no response. They don't even respond. They respond to everything else when they want my vote for legislation, but they've never responded to the letter about the Black Sovereign Movement meeting, having an audience with these people who say that they represent us.
Amazing.
It's crazy.
But I find the funny thing is that the position that you take is really clear. I find it's quite simple to explain. But okay, so let's do it then. I know you've done it 100, 1,000 times before, probably, but for the sake of plain speaking discussion, can you please state what your position is on treaty as opposed to the voice of Parliament?
Absolutely. And it goes back to a war being declared on our people over 200 years ago, and that there has been no peace. There has been no treaty. We are one of only a few Commonwealth countries in the world that does not have a treaty with its first people. A treaty is about a peace agreement, bringing two warring groups or two groups who have a disagreement, coming together and making an agreement on how we're going to move forward together. And that is what we ultimately need to truly unite this country, but also mature as a country and have a strong identity as a country that we can all be proud of and celebrate. I'm not saying get rid of, all the other celebrations we have. We might have to tweak a few to ensure that they're not racist. But other than that, there's so much opportunity that we have with treaty, and the fact that the Constitution is a colonial concept made up by colonisers that has done so much harm to our people for so long, having a powerless voice is not going to, from my observation as a politician that does the day-to-day business in the parliament, I can just see the advisors being scheduled into diaries, and if that's not the priority of the day for a politician, then it's not going to be the priority for the day or week or month or ever.
Yeah.
And we know that there are politicians in there that will never take advice from a Indigenous advisory body, regardless of how nice it feels for others.
Yep. So, yeah, you're talking about concrete gestures, treaties that have been, most places that at some point have been colonised, there was either a treaty formed at the outset or later on. That counts for most places in the world. That involves a series of solid, negotiations, of solid gestures and changes to be made. And you're talking about doing that before doing largely symbolic stuff. And I think that makes sense.
And can I just add, Tom, that, they're throwing around this 80% of Indigenous people or First Nations people support the voice. That 80% is out of 300 people.
Oh, good.
So we have to be careful about stats that get thrown around, because it's 80% of 300 people, which is not good enough. And the Yes Voice people talk about this consultation being the greatest ever. Well, I challenge that, because I think the biggest consultation with First Nations people in this country was clearly the reconciliation movement in the year 2000, which I was also a part of. My mother was on the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation, and I was one of the grassroots people working in Victoria to hold community meetings. No one was excluded from community meetings back in those days, and it was no invite-only arrangement, which is what you saw with those regional dialogues that the Voice people continue to talk about.
Yeah. On the weekend, on the ABC's Insiders program, David Spears interviewed Jacinta Price so that she could rehash these repeat, baseless, anecdotal claims about child sexual abuse that she keeps peddling, along with, Peter Dutton. And then the next day, Sarah Ferguson interviewed Anthony Albanese, and she asked him no less than 5 times about the merit of these claims.
Peter Dutton's trip to Alice Springs and his calls for action over alleged child sexual abuse recall the lead up to the Howard government intervention. If Peter Dutton provides evidence of his claims, will the federal government investigate them?
Well, no, they should be investigated by the police.
He says that you were made aware of abused children being returned to their abusers. It's a very serious allegation. The inference was that you failed to act. Is that true?
No.
There was no information brought to you about abused children being returned to their abusers?
No.
What's he basing that on then?
I have no idea.
Are you suggesting that Peter Dutton made that fact up?
Well, I don't regard it as a fact.
This is all took place on the ABC. The ABC had like an instrumental role, arguably, creating the circumstances leading to the anti-intervention. If we consider the Late Line report that peddled baseless child sexual abuse allegations back then. Do you think the ABC or the media construct is trying to repeat history here?
Tom, the reason why I'm doing this interview with you is because there are no media outlets that I'm aware of or that I've dealt with at the moment that allow for a true conversation to occur. I think that they're all running on an agenda, and that they have voice departments now within every media outlet. At the Age, the Oz, and the ABC. So if that's, and you look at how it's being reported, well, clearly it's an agenda, and you might have saw me call out Patricia Carvelis for that.
Yes.
It just seems very biased, and I think what people don't report on in the Northern Territory is the fact that the problems that are happening in the Northern Territory are because of colonisation. They are because of genocide. They are because of dispossession of land. They are because of the removal of children, because of the incarceration of children, of their parents.
Yeah.
It is a symptom of genocide. And until we address the genocide that has occurred and continues to occur, removing children is an act of genocide. That's what should be front page of our papers, that Australia, this great land, commits genocide to First Nations kids according to the Geneva Convention on genocide. So where is the outcry for that?
Yeah.
And the media is complicit. The governments are complicit. Labor particularly, who've been in power for so long, you know, they've got the monopoly in the government, obviously, but also in the bureaucracy and in the organisations that they pay to do as they're told and do as they say. And it's heartbreaking when you go out into community and you sit down and you sit with clans and they tell you that they're too scared to speak up because a land council has dominated and you're targeted. I mean, we hear so many stories about that. Hear a story of a family sleeping on a concrete slab in the Northern Territory and those kids still going to school every day. How is government allowing this to happen? Let's not talk about alcohol. Let's talk about genocide. Fix the genocide. Stop the genocide. And you'll see the fruits of just ending the war.
But we ignore actual problems that Indigenous children face while weaponising, you know, misframed or inflated or even outright made up ones for political purposes. In that Spears interview, Price said that she wants a Canberra-run child sexual abuse body for Indigenous children, and she said their voices are not given the same reverence as someone like Grace Tame. So she's pitting rumoured weaponised child sexual abuse, you know, rumours for, you know, a politicking purpose against real child sexual abuse victims. It seems there's no room for actual compassion for Indigenous children. We're just using this issue to politic once more, you know?
Look, I must say, I didn't expect much more. And that's been the narrative all along, and that's that it's a fear-mongering tactic and very divisive tactic. I mean, they all attack me for being divisive.
Yeah.
I'm just calling out bad behaviour, and when I talk about whiteness, I talk about the colonial system and the whiteness of that, and the fact that we need to change that kind of whiteness to ensure that everybody feels safe and are able to prosper on these lands that belong to First Nations people and look after them the same way we have for thousands of generations.
Lydia, you've left the Greens, and you know you said at the time, I believe, that gave you the space, you know, in the Senate on the crossbench to fully represent the Black sovereign movement, essentially a grassroots and activist movement, like it or not, Parliament, you know, from within Parliament. What are you excited to get stuck into now that you're on the crossbench and fully able to pursue that?
Well, treaty. I won't stop fighting for treaty. My old people and the sovereign movement that provide the advice to me have given me the permission to continue that fight. Also, the deaths in custody recommendations, something that my mum was also involved in, and the bringing them home recommendations. I want justice I'm there to get justice. I'm not there for the money. I've been doing this all my life as a poor black woman raising my kids. So I'm certainly not there for the money, and I'm certainly not there to be a big shot. You know, it's not about me. It's about my people. And I'm the mechanism to allow their voice, because it's been silenced for so long. I'm the mechanism to bring their voice. And, you know, some of the feedback, just going back to last Saturday night from black women around the country, is, hey, sis, that's what happens to me. That happens to me all the time. And, geez, I would have done worse than that, sis. Thanks for standing up and thanks for being true. And we know what it's like. And to hear that was like, okay, you know, I know that that's what it's like because I've dealt with that prior to being a politician. It just never made the news. But what it's done for other women and black women out there, I think, has been comforting to know that if it can happen to anybody, right? And these people are out there, and the fact that it's usually that demographic, and unfortunately it's a demographic that's part of this right-wing Nazi movement that continue to write about me and try to intimidate me.
Oh, they're obsessed. You make them angry and scared, I think. Yes.
Yeah, so I believe there's underlying element of that always there. And the AFP themselves have told me that I need to be aware. And if we go back to when my name was on their fence at an invasion on Invasion Day a couple of years ago, apparently one person's been arrested from that. You know, where's the news? Where's the news? These are white fellas, young white fellas, who think that they can threaten me and shut me down. I don't see much difference between the far right media right now and what that far right Nazi group are doing. They're just doing it in a different way.
They're all scared of you. I think that I'm so excited to see you exactly where you are, and I'm excited to see your presence and your voice. I mean, I'm optimistic that your voice and your presence will appear in more of these discussions about you in future, so that they involve you, because you've got so much to offer. But hey, look, you've always got a space in my little scrappy neck of the woods, you know what I mean, if that doesn't come to pass. Tell me, Lydia, before we're done, do you have anything to plug or to draw people's attention to, or just anything else you'd like to say while we're here?
Well, I would just say thanks for taking the time, Tom, to have this yarn, and the fact that we're basically setting the bar here. We're setting the rules, you know. If these other media outlets want to continue to demonise me and tell lies, then I will not communicate with those people, and I will continue to work with independent and up-and-coming media outlets to ensure that there is accuracy of information going out there, and we have to stop demonising people who speak truth, but also that I can't talk too much about an amendment that I have in the referendum bill coming up into Parliament, but I'd like everyone to tune in. I'll put something out on my social media, but it'll really make this Parliament think about whose side they're on when it comes to our sovereignty, and whether they really would like to acknowledge us as the first peoples of these lands or not. So watch this space. But yeah, look, I'm good. My mental health is great. I've just been for a bike ride, and I'm with my loving partner, and we've got a nice feed planned for tonight. My kids are good. Everyone's good. My dogs are happy. I think that there's some politicians in Parliament that might need, some mental health first aid or some mental health checking themselves. Given, I've had senators from the coalition cry to me because of what white people have done to black people. Cry to me in the chamber. I've had so much white guilt in that place that I think that there does need to be some mental health assessment of many politicians. But as far as I'm concerned, and, my counsellor has sent me a text message yesterday saying, I've got your back, can't wait till our next session. And he's a black man from America who gets it and who was part of the Black Lives Matter over there. So,
Amazing.
if they want to check on my mental health, they're free to contact my deadly Black Lives Matter counsellor who's supporting me all the way. And we're debating whether we should be calling out racism or not, or whether I should just suck it up. So maybe think about that. Viewers, what would you do if you were constantly violently harassed and racially vilified when you're just out having a good time, or whether you're in your workplace or in your
That's right.
schoolyard? So thank you.
Thank you.
And here's to a treaty. And let's got to have treaty first, then we go to republic.
Treaty first, then republic. I love it. That sounds like a much more solid plan than a bunch of symbolic gestures and culture wars and the like. I love it. Senator Lidia Thorpe, thank you so much for your time, mate.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you again so much to Senator Lidia Thorpe for her time and energy. And I think it might have been Lydia who first introduced me to the Pay the Rent grassroots collective, which supports a variety of Indigenous community initiatives in Victoria and nationally. So if you want to find out more about that or contribute, then hit up paytherent.net.au. And if you want to support my scrappy little efforts with a humble clam or two, then it's patreon.com/Tom Tanuki. Cheers.